Lauren Hayes had not thought about her ice maker in 4 years. Not once. Not when she cleaned the refrigerator. Not during the deep clean she did twice a year, where she wiped every shelf, sanitized the vegetable drawer, replaced the water filter on schedule like the manual said. She thought about the water filter. She never thought about what happened to the water after the filter. She was 44 years old, a nurse practitioner in Atlanta, Georgia, someone who professionally understood contamination, infection vectors, the gap between what looks clean and what is clean. She washed her hands with surgical precision. She thought carefully about food safety. She was, by any standard, someone more aware than average of the invisible threats in a domestic environment. She had not thought about the ice maker in 4 years. In July 2023, Lauren's 7-year-old daughter Mia came home from a week at summer camp with what appeared to be a stomach bug. Fever, nausea, 3 days of gastrointestinal distress that Lauren treated at home with the clinical confidence of a healthcare professional who knows what a viral gastroenteritis looks like. It wasn't viral. Mia's stool culture came back 5 days later. Pseudomonas aeruginosa, a bacterium that healthy 7-year-olds don't pick up from summer camps. A bacterium that lives in water, specifically in the biofilm that forms in enclosed water systems that are humid, dark, and never cleaned. Lauren's ice maker had not been cleaned in 4 years. The ice she had put in every glass of water her daughter drank that week, and for the 4 years before, was growing Pseudomonas in a biofilm layer inside the ice machine's water reservoir, the drip tray, and the lines between the filter and the freezing plate. Before you understand how a biofilm builds inside an appliance you never think about, and why the water filter you replace on schedule has nothing to do with the contamination that forms downstream from it, there is a number that will make you walk to your kitchen before this video ends. 72 hours. That is how long it takes, at room temperature, for a biofilm to establish itself in a wet enclosed surface that is never disinfected. Not weeks, not months. 72 hours from first exposure to an established, adherent bacterial community that is qualitatively different from free-floating bacteria in water, more resistant to cleaning, more resistant to chlorine, invisible to any sensory inspection, and capable of surviving the ice-making process at temperatures that kill planktonic bacteria but do not penetrate biofilm structure. The biofilm inside Lauren's ice maker had been building for 4 years. It was not visible. It had no odor. The ice it produced looked completely clear. And it had been delivering a dose of Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Salmonella, and E. coli, the specific organisms that a 2016 study published in the Journal of Environmental Health found in domestic ice makers tested without prior cleaning notice, into every drink in Lauren's household for longer than she had any reason to suspect. But before you understand what was growing inside Lauren's ice maker, and the specific biological reason why ice is actually more dangerous than the water it came from, there is something about biofilm that the cleaning instructions in your refrigerator manual do not tell you. Because understanding it will change the way you think about every appliance in your kitchen that touches water and is never cleaned. And you have at least one. Biofilm is not contamination in the way most people understand contamination. It is not bacteria floating in water that you can rinse out. It is not a stain you can wipe away. Biofilm is an organized biological community, bacteria that have transitioned from individual free-floating cells to a structured collective embedded in a self-produced matrix of polysaccharides, proteins, and extracellular DNA. This matrix anchors the community to the surface, creates protected microenvironments for different bacterial species, facilitates communication between cells, and most critically, creates a physical and chemical barrier that makes the community between 10 and 1,000 times more resistant to disinfectants than the same bacteria in planktonic form. Chlorine at concentrations that kill free-floating Pseudomonas aeruginosa in seconds can take hours to penetrate and destroy an established biofilm, and in the concentrations present in domestic water supply, which are calibrated for safe human consumption rather than biofilm eradication, it rarely penetrates at all. The water filter in Lauren's refrigerator removes particulates, chlorine, and some contaminants from the incoming water. It does its job. But downstream from the filter, in the water reservoir, in the plastic lines, in the drip tray where water sits between ice-making cycles, there is no chlorine. There is no disinfectant. There is warm, dark, enclosed, humid plastic. There is time. There is everything a biofilm needs and nothing that stops it. And here is the biological mechanism that makes ice specifically more dangerous than the water it was made from. Freezing concentrates bacteria at the surface of the ice crystal as the water solidifies. When ice melts in a drink, The first liquid release contains a higher concentration of whatever was in the biofilm at the surface of the freezing plate than the original water ever contained. The ice Lauren gave Mia was colder than the water that made it. It was also more contaminated per milliliter of melt than any water that had come through the filter. The freezing process, the very thing that was supposed to make it safe, was doing the opposite. But the mechanism gets worse, and the part you haven't heard yet is the part about what Pseudomonas aeruginosa specifically does when it gets into the wrong host. Because Mia recovered, not every child who has swallowed ice from an unclean home ice maker has been healthy enough to recover from what was growing in it. Pseudomonas aeruginosa is what microbiologists classify as an opportunistic pathogen, which means that in healthy immunocompetent adults, it rarely causes severe disease. But the definition of healthy immunocompetent is narrower than most people assume, and the consequences when Pseudomonas finds a host whose immunity is even slightly compromised are documented in the medical literature with the kind of specificity that makes the contents of an uncleaned ice maker feel like a different category of risk than it did 30 seconds ago. In 2022, researchers at the University of Colorado published a systematic review in infection control and hospital epidemiology documenting 23 outbreak investigations in which ice or ice machines were identified as the transmission vector for healthcare-associated infections. In 14 of those 23 outbreaks, the causative organism was Pseudomonas aeruginosa or Legionella pneumophila. In 8 of the 14, the ice machines had been serviced and visually inspected within the previous 6 months, and passed the inspection, because the inspection protocol did not include biofilm testing of the internal surfaces. The ice looked fine. The cultures said otherwise. In domestic settings, the epidemiology is harder to trace because home ice makers are not under the same scrutiny as hospital ice machines. But in 2019, investigative testing by NSF International, the organization that certifies food equipment safety standards, found that domestic refrigerator ice makers were among the top 5 locations in the average American home for microbial contamination, alongside cutting boards and kitchen sponges. In tested units, 36% harbored mold and yeast. 14% tested positive for Salmonella or E. coli. 36% of home ice makers with active mold or yeast contamination. 14% with fecal indicator bacteria. Lauren replaced her water filter every 6 months. She had never cleaned her ice maker once. And the reason the filter replacement gave her a false sense of security is the reason this contamination pattern exists in kitchens across America. Because the filter is the part of the refrigerator's water system that has a visible replacement reminder. The ice maker drip tray, the water reservoir, and the freezing plate have no reminder. Most refrigerator manuals recommend cleaning them every 3 to 6 months. Most people never do it because there is nothing to prompt the memory. The filter change is the ritual. The cleaning is the absence. Mia recovered fully in 8 days. But what Lauren found when she opened her ice maker for the first time in 4 years, really opened it, removed the ice bin, took a flashlight to the water reservoir and the drip tray, was something that changed the way she thought about the word clean permanently. The biofilm was visible, not subtle. A gray-pink film coating the interior of the water reservoir, thicker at the corners where water sat longest between cycles. A dark residue in the drip tray channel. The inside of the ice bin, the container where the ice fell, and was stored until it was scooped into a glass, had a faint milky film on the sides that she had never noticed because she had never looked with a light. Lauren was a nurse practitioner. She understood biofilm intellectually. She had seen it in clinical contexts, in wound care, in the context of medical devices that required protocol-based decontamination. She had not applied any of that knowledge to the appliance that touched every beverage her family consumed every day. The instinct was not negligence. It was the same cognitive pattern that makes biofilm ubiquitous in domestic environments. The absence of a visible signal that something is wrong. The ice looked clean. The drinks tasted fine. The appliance functioned exactly as expected. There was nothing to prompt the question that Lauren had professionally trained knowledge to ask and never asked at home. The ice maker had been doing what it was supposed to do every day for 4 years, so had the biofilm inside it. The gap between what refrigerator manufacturers recommend for ice maker maintenance and what consumers actually do has been documented in consumer behavior research from the NSF International and echoed in public health literature about domestic contamination. The gap exists not because consumers are indifferent to their family's health. Lauren is an example of why that explanation is too simple, but because the maintenance reminder architecture of domestic appliances is asymmetric. The water filter has a light. It has a visible countdown, It has a physical cartridge that you hold and replace and discard. It creates the ritual. The ice maker drip tray has nothing. No light. No physical reminder. No visible signal of contamination. No feedback loop that connects the act of cleaning to any perceivable change in the product it delivers. The cleaned ice and the biofilm ice look identical. What Mia's stool culture provided that 4 years of clean-looking ice had not was a feedback loop. A result. A number. Pseudomonas aeruginosa in a 7-year-old who had been drinking from the same ice maker her whole life. Lauren cleaned the ice maker the day she got the culture result. 3 cycles of white vinegar solution. 1 cycle of baking soda solution. Hot water flush. She examined the interior with a flashlight before reassembling. She scheduled a reminder in her phone calendar for every 3 months. The ice the next day looked exactly the same as the ice from the day before. That is the part that stays with you. What Lauren's case, the NSF data, the University of Colorado outbreak review, and the 36% contamination rate in tested domestic ice makers reveals is that the ice maker is the appliance in the average American kitchen most likely to be producing contaminated food or beverage contact material right now, not because of a failure in the water supply, but because of a structural gap between maintenance recommendation and maintenance reminder that exists in every refrigerator manual and in almost no refrigerator owner's practice. What Mia never needed to experience was 8 days of a bacterial infection from a source that her mother would have eliminated in 30 minutes if anyone had ever made the reminder as visible as the water filter light. What Lauren never received was the reminder. What she received instead was a stool culture result for her 7-year-old. The ice maker is clean now. The reminder is set. The ice looks exactly the same. The ice looked clean. It had never been clean. The difference between an ice maker that delivers clean ice and one that delivers bacteria-laden biofilm directly into every drink you pour is not the water quality coming in, not the refrigerator brand, not the age of the appliance. It is 1 cleaning cycle every 3 months, 30 minutes, no special equipment, 2 ingredients you already have. Remove the ice bin and discard all existing ice. Mix 1 cup of white distilled vinegar with 1 cup of warm water. Using a clean cloth or soft brush, scrub the interior walls of the ice bin, the water reservoir access points, and the drip tray, every surface that contacts water or ice. Rinse thoroughly with clean water. For machines with accessible water lines, run 2 full ice-making cycles and discard both batches before returning to normal use. That is the complete protocol. 30 minutes, $3 of white vinegar, every 3 months. Set the reminder now. Not when you remember it next. Now. Because the specific thing about biofilm contamination in ice makers is that it builds on a timeline of weeks, not years. Lauren's 4-year interval was unusually long, but a 3-month-old biofilm in a never-cleaned machine is a functionally different biological environment from a machine cleaned last week. You will not taste the difference. You will not see the difference. The ice will look identical before and after. That is exactly why the reminder has to be in your calendar before you close this video. But the ice maker is not the only water contact appliance in the average American kitchen that builds biofilm in complete silence between the manufacturer's recommended cleaning intervals and the actual cleaning interval most people follow. In the next video, the coffee maker and the specific reason that the warm, humid interior of a drip coffee machine is one of the most productive biofilm environments in a domestic kitchen, what NSF International found when they cultured the water reservoirs of machines that had never been descaled, and why the coffee you brewed this morning may have passed through a microbial community that your immune system has simply been tolerating without your knowledge.